why have the Wales Co-op doing something? Why have somebody else inventing something else? If that squib is going to do what it says it's going to do on the tin, then our social responsibility elements and being social enterprises and being sort of, and I think I had a conversation with someone earlier on as well about what is a social enterprise, because we all that goes round and round, and it's about sort of big companies and profits and really sort of the leaner, meaner type of organisation that says that it has a social conscience is not a social enterprise, and it's like trying to find a way to put almost like a tick box with a non-compliance bit for social enterprises for us to really know exactly where we're coming from with these things.
Because there's the two extremes, isn't it? There's like the companies it's mainly corporate social responsibility, not social enterprise.
Yeah.
And then you've got the community enterprises, community projects, which class themselves as social enterprises.
It's all grant funding and different, very different to going out there and
between the social enterprise. And I think that's where the confusion comes in. Because it would be great to have a mapping exercise, because we've done something like that in Torvine, but it's still defining what is a social enterprise.
Have that mapping exercise and then promote the organisations that come out under that mapping exercise, and almost take it out to the big suppliers and to the big companies and say, well, do you know that there's this wealth of experience in the social enterprise sector in Wales that can deliver these types of services. So it's marketing as well.
Demystifying what the words social enterprise mean. Because if you've got,
and as you say, almost having different tiers of social enterprise. You have different tiers of business. We talk about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But even within social enterprises, you have different tiers. You have the ones that just want to set up, as you say, the little cafe in their community centre, which is different to the types of furniture recycling ones that we were talking about this morning, which is a major business in its own right.
I mean, some will never be able to tender frameworks ever, but some with a bit of development work will be, and some probably should be.
And that's the key, really, isn't it? Is what we all should and shouldn't be doing, and whether, I mean, maybe something that if Welsh Government is saying that they're going to provide this support for social enterprises about tendering, one of the things that they can be doing to kickstart it all is to help that organisation to decide whether they should tender or not. And on that note, I can't go, I'm afraid.
Bye.
Rather than marketing individual companies, marketing here are a group of companies that could potentially do it, and these are the benefits of employing or procuring a social enterprise to do this kind of activity and sell it that way.
And a value to the extra, the added value that social enterprises bring.
And rather than individual social enterprises do it, because it's quite difficult because of the time, the resource and the skills, you do it collectively. If you had this mapping exercise and say, well, okay, we've got 30 social enterprises in the field of transport that can provide this kind of service.
Or you've got the other way around. You could say, well, we've got these sort of furniture recycling in 3 areas, but why aren't they in all the other areas? What's so different about it? And there might be gaps then to deliver a service. And again, it's going about market failure when you talk about social enterprises, but there are things that the private sector just can't do. So if it's functioning in certain areas where a social enterprise is providing a service, it might well work.
So using ideas from one area to take that somewhere else.
Or even franchising, this works in this area, let's franchise it out in the other areas and see. Because one of our colleagues from Bank Wales, Jeff, always talks about social franchising, and I think that's something that could really be, again, from a mapping exercise, from a big database, could really, see where the gaps are as well.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody from QVL this morning, doing some work in the valleys, and that seemed to be a franchising type of thing, where they're building up social enterprises and floating them almost to see if they'll work.
So what is our suggestion then? We've sort of gone off on a
I
tangent.
think you've got the database, and then it comes down to demystifying what social enterprise is, and
But
so
it's
people
a
know.
different database to Squid. It's a wider one on social enterprises generally. It's a mapping exercise, isn't it?
Let's come up with some massive acronym like octopus for it or something.
We go with Squid, wouldn't it?
Shark.
Yeah, so that's what we need, and then, like you said, it can feed into demystifying what is social enterprise.
Yeah, because you've got all these different agencies, programs of support, but there's no. I mean, the role of the Welsh government should be to coordinate all that and say, right, they've got the resource and they've got the Wales-wide, pan-Wales-wide resource to look at this and say, right, we're going to pull all this information together. You've done a mapping exercise, and Wales Co-op have got a list of clients, and and Coalfields have done X amount of work with all these. So you put it all together, and I think there isn't anyone out there, and we've talked about this, haven't we? And we've got like a South East Wales steering group which looks at social enterprise specifically, and that's one of the things we looked at. And as soon as we mentioned it, it was like, who's going to do it? It's so much work.
Yeah, that's the trouble. And if you had each authority doing their own version of it, how do you keep it up to date?
Yeah, exactly. It's like with limited companies, you've got Companies House, and you can get records from there and get some statistics and data. But because you've got different types of structures for social enterprise, it would be quite difficult. But definitely something worth trying to map out in the first instance.
I think you'd probably be 90, but you've got like communities first. You've got, and there's a lot out there. I'm sure you could pull it together, but it's nothing like that's ever going to be 100% accurate. But I think it's better than having nothing, isn't it?
The chances of reaching every organisation as well, because like I said earlier, there's some social enterprises that don't even recognise themselves as a social enterprise. They just see themselves as a normal business.
I suppose you could start small and just take the companies, the social enterprises that are on Sell to Wales now, and say, okay, start with the ones that are trying to sell their services and see if there's any correlation between the types of firms that are doing it. Then see if they can be collectively marketed, seeing if there's the gaps in the market in different areas that can be plugged, and then expand that. That's a later point. Start small and see how that works to start off with.
Because ultimately, if you don't know who's out there, you don't know. All the procurement work you can do, but you might be doing really well, and 90% of social enterprises that can go forward for tenders are doing it, but it might be 1%. Until
okay, if we reconvene. Okay, if we try now then, having looked at the barriers, I guess this session is going to quickly look at some solutions then. So I'll take the same order again. Ed's team.
This solution is from someone who's had quite a bit of experience in license specifications for tenders, and it's come from something earlier that the policy at the top may have very good intentions, but by the time it gets down to the sort of local level and the procurement departments, it's very difficult to integrate those because of European legislation, etc. But by integrating or preparing like a blueprint or a social value model to include the carbon footprint, Welsh language, environmental areas, local training. So it's a guide really for procurement departments to follow when they are writing specifications. And the main important area is cleared by legal. Then it gives some people something to follow and a process to integrate quite easily. If you want to expand on that, you're welcome to.
Which is really providing the procurement officers who perhaps will be faced with a blank sheet of paper to write a specification that includes social responsibility or allows you to take note, to take account of the added value that a social enterprise can build. Here are some model specifications, and they've all been cleared as perfectly legal in an OJEC for competition. Just take them off the shelf or off the website.
I mean, again, Brendan knows more than I do on this. We do produce guidance in this area. We produce guidance particularly something called community benefits, but evidently...
It's already there, that's great.
Well, there's a problem though, isn't it? Because if it is already there, it's not getting to its intended audiences, obviously. And secondly, having looked at the guidance, I think it's good, but maybe it needs to be more explicit and direct. I think at the moment there is good community benefits guidance there, but I think this idea of model specifications is
you could
a
just
very,
take
very
out
good
and
one.
add it and
So examples
slide
where I
into
said, oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
You know, and so people can actually practically see when they're designing specifications, it is you will be legally compliant if you actually do that.
Yeah.
So,
They
yeah,
literally
I think
just
it's a
cut and paste into their contract.
I think the system's all there. Most technology companies tender approach, community benefits guidance, and then we do a whole load of work with training procurers on sustainability risk assessments, which factors all these bits and pieces in. The system's there. It's the soft skills that need to be developed. It's giving people the confidence to use them. And I think there is perhaps something around model specifications, but the danger with model specifications is people just keep using them, and then other people in the room will say, well, what about innovation? And so there's a bit of a balancing act there, but it's, we're massive, we are understaffed in terms of procurement professionals in Wales. It's recognised, and it's something we're working on. A lot of procurement within Wales and across the public sector generally is not carried out by procurement professionals. It's people who happen to hold a budget or a head of service, and they don't always make the decisions in the way that you'd like. Or if they bring procurement in, don't always give the time to consider these things and plan the thing properly. It's kind of, well, I've got a budget, I've got to spend it or I'll lose it. So
I think there's a
it becomes
general
bit
point
different
around
from-
that as well. I actually think sometimes there's too much guidance there, too much of that. And I think sometimes what we need to do is simplify it, but then the very best and the most crucial guidance, focus on that and make sure that reaches the key audience. Because one thing I often see there's various collaborations, there's various guidance documents, and if I was doing buying all of the time, I think maybe I'd find that a bit overwhelming. So maybe it's actually consolidating and just getting the really key guidance out to them.
We were talking about, I think one of the big needs generally is the development of an overarching database of what social enterprises are out there, where they are in terms of their development, and perhaps, you say if there was, for example, 500,000 social enterprises in Wales, how many of them can actually tender, perhaps classify it? Some of them will never need to, will never look at it because they've already developed as far as they can, and some of them, oh sorry.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, it's perhaps going to be some kind of a tiering structure to say, okay, these organisations just exist to provide a particular service and they won't be able to tender. These will need development support to move forward, and these are actually ready to tender, and you can target them what support is out there, because if you don't know who's out there, it's difficult to know what support they need to get them tendering.
I'm going to come in on that because somebody in the last session I was in came up with an idea that I thought at first was a bit batty, but the more I've thought about it, I really think it's quite clever. You need to think about it a lot. This came totally out of the blue. Only about an hour ago, she said, you know what would really be good is if we developed and get a social enterprise to develop it as well. It's a bit like Sell to Wales, right? In a way, what you would do is social enterprises, any goods or services they can supply, they put up onto this database, and the information could face out either to the general public or say to a public buyer. So say for example you manufacture candles like that guy earlier. No. So in other words, I could go on as Joe Public and see how much he charges and buy some candles off. So it acts as kind of that facility. But also then, not that I can think of any reason, if I was a local authority and I needed to buy candles in bulk, there'd be a different interface for me and I could buy them at a different price. So basically I can go on there as a social enterprise, it's a site for me to sell my goods and services, but then buyers can go on there. So in other words, it's giving social enterprises, their own site, and people, individuals or buyers will go on there knowing, well, maybe I'm going to pay slightly more on this site, but I'm going to do it because there's a social purpose behind it. And I know what people think. I just wanted to mention that because
Yeah,
something already.
I was looking at one yesterday that's got that. Yeah.
they do that sort of thing.
Yeah, there is one. Yeah.
So the public can go on there and they can buy.
Not necessarily the public, no, but this
Yeah.
is sort of within the sector, business to business. Or
Yeah,
charity,
it is, I
charity.
think it is supposed to be public facing, but I don't think they really advertise that as much yet.
I don't think my wife goes onto WCVA website.
Might be interesting to
Christmas
think about.
presents.
I mean, I think particularly with
This
a
is
public
the website.
dimension,
John
though, I
Lewis,
think, yeah. But, I think that would be quite something, wouldn't it? Anyway,
But also we were talking about We were talking about then collective marketing of the sector to larger businesses.
Yes.
Because you were talking about taking out, talking to the larger businesses about them doing business with social enterprises. But as this lady here was saying, it's quite difficult for one social enterprise to go and knock on the door. So if you had collective marketing of certain types of social enterprises into other certain types of business, that might work well as well.
And I think, again, we're at a bit of a turning point on all of this because I recently, with Duncan, met the Minister to discuss corporate social responsibility and came up with, if you like, for want of a better term, the old traditional way of doing it. And the Minister, no, don't do it like that. We're going to do it by working with anchor companies, in other words, with the BTs, with the Admirals, with the British Gas, and basically saying we've got to work, pretty much hand in glove with them. The only way that we can transform the company is by working very closely with these companies. So again, that's an interesting point. I mean, maybe does our way of working start to evolve, but as we understand social enterprises better, what they're capable of doing, and we've got that understanding, when we meet with large businesses to discuss different issues, we start to say to them, well, could you use some of these social enterprises in terms of some of your subcontracting? So I think the timing's good.
Went to talk this morning. That's basically what they're doing in the Olympic region.
Yes.
And they're talking about coming out. So they're
Yeah.
talking to the biggies who are then working
Yeah.
and supporting the developing social enterprises. What if there's contracts coming up? They're known, they're their babies, aren't they? That there may be a mindset change there where they'll.
Right, because we are working closely with BITC, and I was talking to Simon about it earlier, and I think that's very much what we want to do. And the great thing is, most of these big companies, they like to look good on CSR, because when they're probably going for government plan application or whatever, they can say we're doing all these great things in terms of corporate social responsibility there. Yeah. Okay, final one then, because we were running slightly over, and I got to catch a train. Yeah.
Can I check one in that? What about just marketing case studies of examples where you have used social enterprises or they've come together in a subcontract relationship, just publicising the ways that you are support or that they've won contracts, which would perhaps enlighten commissioners, enable other social enterprises to perhaps be motivated to go for more contracts. I don't know, just raise awareness.
I think that's important, and what I'm conscious of as well is we've got some big websites. We've got Sell to Wales, which has got 30,000 suppliers on it, and the buyers are going on to it. We've got 400 buyers on it. We've got a business.gov.wales website that's got 18,000 businesses registered on there. 30,000 visits a month. I think we've got to start using these online channels a lot more, and as a way of showcasing best practice, and then really reinforcing that then to buyers as well at the same time. I agree with you. I think we need something. We need demonstrable examples of where it's working, because most of it is fairly human, actually. If you're a buyer, let's be honest, it's not that easy. You think, the cost, I've got to make sure the thing works. That social enterprise over there, well, it sounds good, but I don't really know them that well. So, so yes, I go with that. And if it's anything we can start to explore with Karen, sort of gathering up case studies, promoting them, promoting them to commissioners, I think, yeah. Good. Okay, thank you all very much indeed.